So, with that, let's enjoy the sound of this beautiful chime. Ooh, I moved it and bonked it a little bit. You know, when my children were little and they were wild, my children are somewhat feral, growing up in a rural environment in the country, but they would sometimes be indoors being a little bit too wild. And I never enjoyed the tone, the sentiment of time out for my kids to get their attention. So I had a chime and I would say, okay, everybody, we're going to chime out. Isn't that wonderful? And they knew to kind of come back to themselves, and then I would chime them back in. And it was a lovely way to model for my kids, model for these young minds, the value of pause and the importance of just creating some space around whatever is happening in their lives. Today, friends, you are joining SatiSeva. And SatiSeva is an affinity group associated with Recovery Dharma. And this is all about the pursuit of mindfulness. 16 different mindfulness practices to explore the ways that we can reimagine what it means to be in recovery, as well as what it means to support each other in recovery. Because one of the things that we're endeavoring to do in a Buddhist practice is remember that habit energy, positive, negative, however it's arising in your life, if it's out of balance, if it's out of alignment with one's integrity, it can disrupt one's life, get in the way of one's magnificence. And so habit energy is universal. We all have it. It may, for some people, appear in the form of the misuse of drugs and alcohol. For someone else, it's habit energy around food. For other people, it could be the habit of mind and the stories we narrate, and how those stories and how those narrations have so much power that they govern actions. And those actions are unskillful and immature. That kind of patterning, that kind of habit energy can be every bit as devastating and as destructive as abusing drugs and alcohol. And if you don't believe me, just look at the political landscape in the United States. Just look around. Look around at the way Americans have been modeled to treat each other. It doesn't take much to shift the mind away from patience and tolerance to something else. And if you're someone who appreciates policies and things like that are happening in this landscape, that's great. And I would simply encourage you to broaden the perspective and consider the ways some of those policies are negatively impacting people. And then turn that gaze back towards oneself. How are my actions, how are my thoughts negatively impacting other people? Because we do have a choice to put negativity in the world or something else. But we can't do that without practice. And so in SatiSeva, we are really trying to look at mindfulness on a very big broad spectrum, 16 practices focusing on issues related to recovery and support. We've been, for the past several weeks, exploring the mindfulness practice of space, how to look at something, good, bad, neutral, add some space around it to maybe see it from another point of view. You know, sometimes in my own experience, I can be so fixed on having a perspective. This is what I see. I'm going to show you this perspective. And this perspective defines my can of seltzer water. That's it. This sort of mirror, silver mirror looking image. That's one perspective, and just one. Because my can is also this perspective and this perspective and this perspective and so on. And so the cultivation of space is that wonderful capacity for the mind to get curious. What else is here? What am I not seeing? If I think I'm seeing so clearly, if I believe so fully that I have the whole big picture here, can I just zoom out a little bit more and turn my gaze to the cosmos, the unknowable universe? There's so much about the universe that we will never, ever know. It's too vast, it's too big. So just when we think we've got it all figured out, we know, we can remember that the universe has a gaze upon us, which we will never grasp. It's humbling. And it's a gentle reminder to create that kind of space and to be open to things that we may not see and to soften our stance and to wonder. And why this is important is because to be alive is to stand before uncertainty. And most of us struggle with that. We want to know. We got to know. We got to feel like we're in control, right? If I'm navigating uncertain waters, I'm really uncomfortable. Yes, that is true. And the truth is, the nature of reality is uncertain. It's impermanent. So we can practice, we can increase our capacity to be with this uncertainty, but we can't get there if we don't learn to cultivate space. So today, what I thought I would do is share with you from the space chapter. If you're reading along with me, I'm on page 76. And what I'd like to do is share with you the practice. It's just a very simple breathing meditation. And then I'm going to share with you the instruments of peace. And for those of you who are new to SatiSeva, instruments of peace are the tools that we use to help nurture and cultivate these mindfulness practices. And I'd like to review them today. So that's our practice today. To prepare the body for contemplation and the mind for this reflection, let's take a minute to breathe. And these breathing practices are entirely inspired by Thich Nhat Hanh, who was my first Buddhist teacher. And I remember when I first started practicing, I was very skeptical about these breathing meditations because it was too simple. And I had been living a life that had quite a bit of chaos in it, a lot of complexity, a lot of stress and strain. And so to have something so simple was such a betrayal, such an awkward situation to what I was accustomed to. And so my whole being had to shift. But I've been practicing this way for years now. And I know that its simplicity is what makes its efficacy so profound. Find a posture in the body that feels completely at ease. I'm sitting down on a cushion, my legs are crossed. I'm sitting nice and tall. My shoulders are rolled back and down so that my collarbone is open, my heart is lifted, my arms are relaxed, my belly is soft, my spine is straight. My eyes are closed. And when I breathe, my tongue is going to be resting on the roof of my mouth when I'm not speaking. That's the typical posture of engagement that I put my body in. You can do this lying down. You can do this walking. Just notice how your body wants to be and make sure you bring some ease and gentleness for your body to receive. We're all here because we are trying to understand our relationship to habit energy enough to shift it, to lessen it, so that its destructive nature will be minimized. And in the space that we create by eliminating the destruction, there's this new space. What are we going to let in? Goodness might not feel comfortable when we're used to doing things that are negative and destructive. Receiving kindness and affection, praise and encouragement might not feel very easy. You might feel a little bit of resistance. And even resistance is a habit energy that we can smile at and wonder about. Breathing in, I create space. Breathing out, to change my habitual ways. Breathing in. Look at all the space you're creating in your belly and in your lungs. Let it float up to the mind even. I create space. Breathing out to change my habitual ways. And friends, whether that change is a half a degree or monumental is irrelevant. Change is change, and every single aspect of it matters and is worth celebrating. Breathing in, I cultivate generosity. Space is a generous thing. Breathing out, to be present to myself and my loved one. Just contemplate that for a minute. When we breathe, when we pause, when we create space, these are all acts of generosity. Isn't that amazing? It's such a profound kindness. And when we breathe it out, let it sort of become and embody your presence to yourself and everyone else, your loved one. Breathing in, I cultivate generosity. Breathing out, to be present to myself and my loved ones. Breathing in, I create space. Breathing out, to be kind to myself and all and to those whom I cherish. And really, we can extend that to all sentient beings. Breathing in, I create space. Breathing out, to be kind. We can just leave it at that. Breathing in, I create space. Breathing out, to change my habitual ways. Breathing in, I cultivate generosity. Breathing out, to be present to myself and my loved ones. Breathing in, I create space. Breathing out, to be kind. For just a couple of minutes, friends, I invite you to listen to yourselves. Listen to the voice of your own wisdom and see if any breathing mantras come forward to guide you. Friends, in the mindfulness practice of space, there's one specific instrument of peace. And it's words matter. Get a thesaurus, which kind of makes me laugh because one might think that that particular instrument of peace ought to be in the wise speech mindfulness practice. But I put it in the cultivation of space practice because the way we speak, the words we use can become a kind of habit energy. And in order to shift our language around, not because we're trying to sound intelligent or well educated or better than other people, but because what we're trying to do is access clarity about what we're really thinking, feeling, and experiencing. And sometimes the same old words just doesn't do it. What I wrote in this chapter was shifting the way you speak to yourself in the privacy of your own mind shifts the way you speak to others. So here's some space to practice with. You don't even have to think about the words that your inner narrative is saying. Create some space around the tone of how you're speaking. That, by the way, tone, we will talk about that in the wise speech chapter. In fact, it's how I begin that chapter. It's so important because you could start speaking in gibberish. You could use nonsense words, but your tone will convey your feeling, your emotion. How you speak is as important as what you say. So the place to begin is to listen to the narration going on in your own mind. Sometimes adding a new word or two helps expand understanding of a situation, a person, or your own mind and heart. You know, one of the examples that I use about generating space around language and the way we describe ourselves or a situation is this really innocent word. I caught myself using it just the other day, and it's the word upset. I'm upset. And I can't remember who I was saying this to. It might have been one of my kids. And they looked at me kind of shocked, like preparing themselves for anger or some kind of aggression. And I could just see it. I could see them getting ready. Not that they were anticipating me being angry at them, but just kind of holding firm to take it, to weather the storm of anger. And what was fascinating was this was all unspoken. I was just reading the nonverbal cues of this person. And I realized that my feeling of upset had nothing to do with anger. I was confused. And so I immediately course corrected and said, oh, wait a second. You know what? Let me use a better word. I'm feeling confused and a little bewildered by this experience. And I don't quite understand what happened. And it's got me a little bit upended, a little uprooted. I can't really find my bearings. I don't feel very grounded, so I feel kind of antsy and irritated. Look at all of those words to describe my upset. And yet, all of those additional words really help clarify my experience, not only for myself, but for the other person who was bearing witness to me. that kind of clarity is a real kindness. And creating some space for that clarity to come forward creates ease for everyone. There's another instrument of peace that I mention in this chapter. There are several, but the one that I'd like to focus on that appears in the mindfulness chapter of openness, which is the one that comes before. It's called Sacred World. This instrument of peace is the recognition that we live in a sacred place. Nothing is outside of the sacred. For me, one of the most reliable and accessible places for me to cultivate some space is to simply go outside. So if you're feeling tight about something, if you're ruminating about something, if you're obsessing about something, if you're feeling really fixed, defensive, righteous, there's no need to judge that experience. Like, what's wrong with me? I can't believe I'm doing this. That's not very motivating. It's not particularly interesting, nor is it very beneficial. So instead, to shift gears, go outside and just ask yourself, what else can I see? What else can I fill my gaze? What I write in this section is go for a walk in a nature preserve, take a drive through some farmland, hike into the mountains, spend some time walking shorelines of lakes, rivers, or the sea. Yesterday in our Recovery Dharma practice, we had a Sangha member who was sitting on his porch and he happened to notice spider webs in the corner of his porch and he was tempted to get rid of them. But as the sun was shining on them, he got to see how magnificent these spider webs were. And he's like, I'm not going to get rid of them. They're too beautiful. That's a spacious awareness. And it certainly is a generous act to leave things alone. Create space around your experiences, your thoughts, your feelings. Something new will always emerge to guide you. And again, if you need a little bit of support in this, go outside. What's that wonderful line from J.R.R. Tolkien? Take one step outside your door, you'll never know where you get swept off to. Something like that. This precious, precious life waiting for you. Breathe that in a spacious way. Breathing in, I create space. Breathing out to see more and more clearly. Friends, I'd like to conclude this practice with this imagery and this thought. And it's inspired by the poetry and the mysticism of John O'Donohue, who wrote about this idea of soul being this very shy kind of presence. And if you shine too bright a light on it, it will retreat. And I think so, and I've observed many, many times that if we keep this glaring spotlight on our one habit energy, like the worst aspect of ourselves, our regrets, our most maladaptive behaviors, and we keep shining that glaring light on it, we keep hammering it with our attention, it becomes more elusive. It becomes harder to see. And so, if we can learn to create a little bit more space around it, it's still going to be there, even if we create space around it. That's the paradox. If we can broaden the light, diffuse the light a little bit, and see more, maybe the thing that we've been hammering and fixating on will slowly come forward in its own time and its own way. And so what came to me was this wonderful beach on Maui called Baby Beach. And it's this really great reef that creates this pool for little kids to go swimming and so forth. But if you can swim to the reef a little bit, there's all these little nooks and crannies that are really, really amazing for snorkeling. And I remember one time seeing an eel in its like little hole. And what was fascinating was the closer I got to it and the more I wanted to look at it to see it more clearly, the more and more it retreated into that hole. It is a shy presence. And so then when I moved away from it, wasn't so head on and direct. And I just kind of paddled around and looked on the reef, and it was still there, and I knew it was still there, and it knew that I knew. And yet I just wasn't so confrontational. And I was moving around, and slowly it emerged, and I could see little bits of it from a different angle. And what if we applied that to our own spirit? What if we applied that to our own journey of recovery? What if we applied that notion to the way we treat our own habit energy? A little more space, a little more perspective, a little more gentle awareness. I wonder. And one of the motivations that I want to be very clear about for bringing these practices forward is the reminder that there's a time and a place for really grinding effort, where we're working hard, we're sweating, we're really pushing through, we're serious, we're making it happen. And then there's time where our effort has to be lighter. It has to be more playful. We have to take a break. Otherwise, the taskmaster, we're just going to be whipped down to nothing if we don't learn how to play, if we don't learn how to lighten up. Later on in the SatiSeva practice, there's a whole mindfulness practice about play and creativity. It's really, really important. So the two practices that I'm going to share with you today, they're very famous. They were just invented today in this moment. The first one is called toss the toothpaste. Toss the toothpaste. And let me tell you why. Have you ever you've got your toothpaste roll, you've got your toothpaste tube, and you're just squeezing every little bit out? What is it about toothpaste where we've got to scrape it with the toothbrush? We got to get every little bit out. Toss the frickin' toothpaste and open up a new tube, people. Right? It's so satisfying. Toss your toothpaste. Every once in a while, you can quit the squeezing. You can quit. You can stop. You can take a break. Take a break. Do something new. It might be incredibly rewarding. The second practice is scramble your letters. Scramble your letters and your words. And this was inspired by one of our community members today that was just talking about recognizing that inner narrative, the pessimism, the cynicism, the negativity, and all of the tone that goes with it. And so I love to scramble words. I love to make up new words. And I just thought I'd share with you how to do it. So today, I wrote down the sentence. It's a sentence in my mind. It's a narration that lives in me right here all the time. I am unworthy. 3 words, full sentence. And it appears in various manifestations. So I first wrote the sentence out, I am unworthy. And then I wrote all the letters. And then I just decided to make up words and a whole new phrase. And the phrase that I came up with was wormy a hunty. Wormy a hunty. Now, I don't know what that means. And that's so weird. And yet, what it did for me, the minute I saw wormy, I was like, oh, yeah, wormy thoughts, which is an instrument of peace, by the way, in the SatiSeva book. And then I just got this light feeling of how much I love the worms in my garden. And I can go hunting for my worms and just enjoy when I see them. Now, I wasn't thinking about worms and gardening or any of that as I was listening to you, but because I played with those words and the phrase, I am unworthy, look at the direction my mind was able to go. The possibilities are limitless. You just have to employ a little bit of creativity. And that creativity, it really is, it's hard to do because we're so habituated on the same thing. Even this motion, imagine if I'm rocking it forward now, moving the hands. There's so many ways you can play with this. So, and you are limited only by your imagination. And to breathe life into the imagination is to breathe life into spirit. And to breathe life into spirit is to breathe life. And that's why we're here. All righty, friends. At 1:00, we have Recovery Dharma, and we're going to listen to a couple of beautiful verses from the work of SatiSeva, an 8th century monk talking all about the cultivation of wisdom. And this particular 2 verses in this chapter 9 that I really love is all about well, it's kind of like the the really intangible nature of mind and the intangible nature of our thoughts. And yet we have convinced ourselves that our thoughts are so real. They're so tangible, they're so graspable. And he gives a kind of neat example of how they're not. And to just make space for, even if you're thinking it really, really heavily, you're obsessing about it, it still doesn't make it real or true. And that's something we have to train in. That's something we have to be reminded of. That's something we have to mature, and it's a practice. So that's what we're going to do in about a half hour. Lo has posted the link to Soul Center so you can see all of our offerings. And there's all kinds of things going on. So I'm just going to leave it at that. And you can email me with any questions or concerns. If you have any questions about the events coming up or what's going down the pike, let me know. The Buddhist Recovery Network, that is something I would encourage you to think about. They're having a retreat conference in Oakland, California in October, the first weekend of October. Give it a look. Give it a look-see. Lo and I are going to be there. I'll be presenting. And it might be a really nice opportunity to practice in person with a whole bunch of Buddhist-y type people. And that might be really, really fun. And the focus obviously is all about recovery. Don't forget, friends, that our sessions, minus the community sharing, are recorded. And those recordings are freely offered. Please access them, use them. And if nothing else, I was on the page today and I was like, holy cow, the image of me on, like, I can't stand looking at videos of me, but it was really humbling because where it pauses and we're advertising these videos of me, my face, I'm like, look at that yoga face. I'm in all kinds of contorted images. It's pretty funny. What was that, Lo?
I try to catch a good one.
Yeah, Lo tries to catch a good one. So I'm like, meh. I mean, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. Anyway, so just check them out, share them. Really, they are meant for people and to support your practice. I'd like to end our practice with a dedication. And the dedication that I'd like to share with you is the one that I wrote in the SatiSeva book. And let's see if I can find it. So, for our dedication of merit today, the invitation is for you to receive this. Often we talk about, in a dedication of merit, having received the merit and the goodness of this practice so that we can, by extension, send it out into the world. That is true. But for this moment, see if you can put your mind, your body, and your spirit in a posture to simply receive this. You don't have to be worthy. You can even be wormy to receive this. Just be you. It's enough. May the wisdom of love encourage presence and care. May the tenderness of love be forgiving and accepting. May the strength of love nurture healing creativity. May the eyes of love gaze with gentle belonging. May the divine call to love ripple far and wide. I dedicate this book to loved ones. I dedicate the merit of this practice to loved ones for all the ways they inspire, challenge, and shape us. And friends, loved ones are you. Sangha, a jewel. We'll see you next time. Namaste.